So hi and welcome to the Coldwater Crown gameplay video. Before I get started, just so you know, everything you're looking at is just a prototype component. I'm just going to show you how to set up the game really quickly. So what you're looking at here is the board, and there's three main fishing locations. There's the lake, there's the river, and there's the shore. And there's fish cards for each deck at each location. So there's the lake fish, there's the shore fish, and there's the river fish. And to start the game, they're all going to be face up. The back side of the fishes shows their weight, so it's important that they're face up so you see just the fish and not the weight. So you're going to put 4 in each location like this from the deck, and whenever a fish is caught, you're going to remove it, and then a new fish is going to take its place, like that. You're also going to put out the trophies, and the trophies look like this. There is, in the rules, it's going to detail which trophies go in which locations, but basically there's a bunch of different challenges that you can accomplish during the game. So for example, here is the small species challenge, and here's the master angler challenge, and then there's a challenge for each of the fishing locations. There's also the mystery weight challenge, the fastest to 8 species challenge, and then the first to 12 fish challenge. So I'm not going to go through all the different trophies that go in those locations, but in general, the top trophy is going to be worth the highest amount of points, and it depends on the number of players that are in the game. But in a 4-player game, for example, the top trophy is worth 5 points, the next one down is worth 4 points, the next one down is worth 3 points. So the first person to get it is going to get more points for it. You're also going to put out these angler tokens, and these are two-sided. So there's a 1 on the one side and 2 on the other side. 3 go on the board in these locations with the one side showing, and then all the players also start with 1 on their player board. Also, each player gets a player board, which you can see here. And the player board needs to be oriented correctly. For example, the zone number over here, you can see this is zone number 6, and zone number 6 needs to correspond in a mirror image to the zone 6 in each of the fishing locations. So just pay attention to that when you're setting up the game. Also, each player starts with bait in their tackle box, their player board. So there's the bait is represented by these gems. So in the zone 3, you put 3 bait, and in zone 4, you put 4 bait, and all players start with that. It's drawn randomly from the bait bag over here, so you don't get to see what color bait you start off the game with. Also put out a tag, and the tag is going to be it's just a special, one of the special challenges that's associated with the game that's scored at the end of the game. Each fish has a different tag color on them, and those will earn you points at the end of the game as well. Also put over here the Master Angler deck. These are special fish cards you can get during the game, and they're caught a little differently than the other fish. I'll lay out 4 face up over here, and you can pick these up as the game goes along. I'll explain that later. And then finally, you'll notice these tackle tokens. These are just tokens that give players a special added bonus throughout the game that helps them catch fish and do other things with their strategy. Each player actually starts with one of those as well, so place one of those in each of the player boards too. And once you've got all that ready to go, then you've set up the game and you're ready to play. The first thing I usually like to explain to players when I'm teaching the game is how to catch a fish. And how you do that is first look at each of the fishing locations. You notice that there's this pattern of 4 fish in a square, and these represent there's 4 different zones. There's zone 3, there's zone 4, zone 5, and zone 6. And the zone number just relates to the number of bait that's going to go in your tackle box in the corresponding zone. So in your tackle box, there's also 4 zones. There's zone 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you should notice that they match up to the fishing location zones as well. So how you catch a fish is whenever you are able to remove the last piece of bait from a zone, you catch a fish in the same color of the last piece of bait that you removed in the same zone at that location. So for example, the shore, there's 2 colors of bait. There's purple bait and there's green bait. So if I were to first remove this black piece of bait, it would go to a discard pile. I have 2 pieces of purple bait left over. If eventually later in the game, if I end up clearing both pieces of purple bait, then I catch a purple fish. And purple fish are represented at the shore because shore fish are purple and green. And I cleared that bait from zone number 3. So I look at the shore, zone 3, and that's the fish I catch. So in this case, I catch mackerel. And when you catch it, you want to flip it over and look at its backside because that shows you the weight of that fish. On the front side of this card, you can't really see because of the focus on the camera, but this is 3 to 7 pounds. Now you flip it over, and again, this is just a prototype, so this is not what the final artwork is going to look like, but this fish is a 5-pounder. So you don't have to share this with the other players. In fact, you should keep it secret, but set it down here. Now you've caught that fish, and that you're going to hang on to that until the end of the game for the to see if it earns points for challenges. But there's one challenge you can potentially get as the game goes along for its weight, and that's the mystery weight challenge, which I talked about earlier. So there's going to be a token here in the center of the table, and the top is going to show you a mystery weight. For example, it might say 3 pounds. So if you catch a fish that weighs 3 pounds, then you'll be able to take that trophy, and you'll collect that trophy, and it'll be a point for you. And then there'll be a new mystery weight after that. So again, you catch a fish whenever you clear the last piece of bait from a zone. So I'm just going to show you from this angle over here. There's red, green, and yellow. So let's say during the game I'm able to clear these two first, and there's still a piece of red bait there, and that's the last one. Whenever this red piece of bait is removed, then I catch a fish in this zone that corresponds to red. So that is the lake. The lake has red and blue fish. And so since I cleared red bait from zone 3, I look at zone 3 and I catch the perch. Again, flip it over to see how much it weighs and put it in your player area for scoring at the end of the game. Now that I've taught you how to catch a fish, I'm going to tell you how to play the game. So first, select a starting player. The last player to go fishing is a good person to select. And then play is going to go clockwise from that player with each person taking their turn. Now on your turn, what you do is you place your angler token. Your angler token is this piece right here. It's two-sided, like I told you earlier. And the angler token can go in the angler spaces that are open. And there are 7 total spaces. There are these circle spaces on the board. There's red space, blue space, green, purple, yellow, black, and then there's the port space. And your angler token can only go in the open spaces. So I can't go here because this space is already filled with a different angler token, but I could go here because that one's open. And when you place it, you take the associated action. So whenever I place it as a 1, here I'm placing the 1 on the blue space. So that means I can remove blue bait from my tackle box. And since I place it as a 1, it means I can remove one piece of bait from each zone. Now I don't have bait in these 2 zones, but I do have blue bait in these 2 zones. I have 1 in each. So I'm going to take 1 from each of those zones, and then I get to clear that to some discard space over here by the side of the board. Don't put it back in the bag with the rest of the bait. That's going to come out, and there'll be a refill mechanic as we go along. So once you place your angler token and take the associated action, here in this case I place the 1, then you pick up a different token and you take the associated action as well. So let me take this one, and I can't take the one I just placed, but I could take this one. This is a red, and it shows 1, so that means I can remove 1 piece of red bait from each of my zones on my player board. And whenever I take it, I flip it to its back side, and that's important, and I set that to the side next to my player board for use on my next turn. But it was a 1 when I picked it up, so I take the 1 side action. So in this case, remove 1 piece of red bait from each of my zones. I only have 1 piece of bait, so I just get to remove that 1, and that goes to the discard space. Now, you might be wondering what the 2 side represents. Well, let's just go back and do that over again using the 2 side instead. So if I had a 2 to start my turn, and I place the 2 on the blue space, then I can remove all the blue bait from all of my zones. So here I had 1 blue bait in this zone and 1 blue bait in this zone, and I was able to take that earlier, 1 from each zone when I placed the 1. When I placed the 2, in this case it really doesn't do much better because I only have 2 pieces of blue bait, and I can remove those. But if I had both pieces of blue bait in the same zone, as you can see here, if I had placed it as a 1, I could only remove 1 piece of blue bait from each zone, so I would have only been able to clear the 1 blue piece of bait there. But if I had placed it as a 2, I can remove all blue bait from all my zones. So I could take both pieces from the same zone, and these get removed to the discard space. So the 2 is more powerful. Whenever you place it, you remove all of the bait of that color from your entire player board to the discard space. So 2 is pretty powerful. Pay attention to that. Now let's say that this had been a 2 out here as well, and here's the 2 on the red. So now I can, whenever I pick up the 2 from the red, that means I can remove all the red bait from my entire player board. And then I flip it to the back side for my next turn, and I set that next to the board. So whenever you're picking up a 2, you take the same action as if you had placed the 2, but then the drawback to that is that when you flip it, your next turn you have a less powerful angler token to use for your next turn. And as you're taking these actions, if you come into a situation where you're removing the last piece of bait from a zone, like I talked to you about earlier, here I'm removing the last 2 pieces of blue bait from zone number 5, then I get to immediately catch a fish along with that. So blue 5 is this sea trout up here, and I would catch that fish, put it in my player area, and put a new fish out there. Zone 5 also gets a special bonus, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but whenever you clear zone 5 or zone 6, you're going to get a special bonus associated with each one of those, but I'll talk about those in a little bit. So I just explained to you placing your angler token and picking up your angler token on the different colored fishing locations. But there's also the port space, and the port space is a little bit special. So how the port space works is similar to the fishing location spaces. Whenever you place your angler token on it, you're going to take an action, and whenever you pick up an angler token from it, you're going to flip it and take an action. So the actions that the port space are related to are refilling your player board, your tackle box, with bait from the tackle bag, and drawing master angler fish to try to catch. So how that works is if you place a 1 on the port space, you get to do one of those 2 things. So for example, I could refill one of the locations on my player board. So here I'm going to try to refill this 5 zone. And whenever you fill a zone, you fill it with the same number of bait as the zone number. So a 5 zone gets 5 bait. A 6 zone gets 6 bait. 3 zone, 3 bait, and the 4 zone, 4 bait. Now, since I placed it as a 1, I can only do that one thing. That's the only thing I can do when I place the 1 at the port. Or I could choose to take a master angler fish instead. So when I do that, I just select one of these cards. I'm going to take I'll take this dogfish here, and I'm going to place it next to my player board. And when I put it next to my player board, choose the side of your board to represent this, the side where you're trying to catch. And then whenever you actually do catch it, you're going to move it to the other side. So here it starts on my left side. And this Master Angler card is how you catch this fish, this dogfish. You'll see that there's some bait color on there. So there's 3 green bait locations. So whenever I remove green bait from my player board, instead of removing it to the discard pile, I get to remove it to the dogfish card. And whenever I fill it up, I have 3 pieces of bait on the dogfish card, then that bait goes to the discard, and then I move the dogfish to the other side of my player board, and it is officially caught. And Master Angler cards like this are great because each one of these is worth a point at the end of the game, and they also help you to catch some extra trophies in the Master Angler Challenge. So again, this is, you pick up one of those cards whenever you place your token at the port space. So again, the 1 means I can either fill 1 zone, or I can pick up 1 card to try to catch that fish. And then as I would play along, then I would start removing bait and putting it on the card. Now, if I had instead placed it as a 2 on the port space, I can take 2 of those actions. So that means I could fill 2 zones with bait on my player board, or I could take 2 fish to try to catch those fish, or I could do 1 of each. I could fill 1 zone on my player board, and I could try to catch 1 fish. So putting a 2 at the port space is a pretty powerful action because it puts you in a good position to have more bait in your player board, which will let you catch more fish from the game board, and it also lets you pick up some of these master angler fish to try to catch those. Now the same thing, and just a reminder for you, is whenever you pick up the token, you get the same action. So if I placed it as a 2, I could take the 2 port space actions. Instead, if I had picked it up as a 2, I get to take the 2 port space actions. Just remember that drawback is I have to flip the token for my next turn, and that sits there for my next turn. Now I'm just going to walk you through a turn to show you what that turn looks like, and also to give you an example of the bonuses you get for clearing zones 5 or zone 6 on your player board. So here my turn starts, and I have a 1 for my angler token. So the first thing I have to do is place the angler token on one of the locations on the board. So I'm going to place it on the 1 space, which you can't really see, but there it is. And remember, whenever you place it on a colored fishing location, you remove bait of that color from your player board. So here I get to remove blue bait because I put it on the blue space. And since I placed it as a 1, I remove 1 piece of bait from each of my zones. Now I have a blue bait here and a blue bait here, so I get to remove those 2 pieces. And those go to the discard pile. Now I removed the last piece of bait from zone 5, so I get to catch the fish that's in zone 5, which is a sea trout in this case. So I collect that, and I also get a bonus. I get to take a piece of tackle because I cleared zone 5. And tackle, there are 4 different types of tackle, And I'm not going to show you what each type is or what they do, but there's 4 different types represented on the back of that tackle token, and you're not going to know which type you get until you take it and flip over and check it out. The tackle just gives you special things, like one piece of tackle, for example, lets you clear 2 pieces of bait from your tackle board, from your player board of the same color. Another one lets you catch a fish that's adjacent to the one you would otherwise have caught, and so on. So you can learn more about those later. So that was the first thing on my turn, is I placed the token, and then I cleared the blue bait, and I was able to catch a fish, and then I got the bonus piece of tackle because I cleared zone 5, and only zone 5 gives me tackle. And now the next thing I do on my turn is I have to pick up a token. So I'm going to take, fortunately there's a 2 over here in the purple spot, so I'm going to pick up the 2. And the 2 means I get to clear all the purple bait from all of my zones because it was on the purple space. So I have, in this case, 2 pieces of purple bait over here in zone 6. And I would clear that normally to the discard pile, but I actually have a ray that I'm trying to catch, and the ray is going to take some purple bait. So instead of putting the gems over there, I get to put the bait here on top of the ray. And whenever I fill it in that last space, that's when I actually catch the ray, and then that bait goes to the discard space. I also have to remember to flip that token over to the other side for my next turn. Since I drew it as a 2, it should be a 1. And now I get to catch that fish from the 6th zone. So zone 6 purple bait represents this wrasse here in the shore. Now let's say I don't really want the wrasse because I already have one, or I don't think I need it for one of the challenges I'm trying to complete. Well, the zone 6 bonus means that I can instead take the top card from the deck over here. In this case, it's also a wrasse, so that's not going to do me any good. But if it had been a different fish, like a mackerel, I might choose to take the mackerel instead of the wrasse that I was supposed to catch. So that zone 6 bonus is pretty powerful, especially if you're trying to catch a different fish and you see that it's available on the top of the deck. So that's pretty much how you play the game. There's not a lot more to it than that. You're always just placing a token, taking the actions, picking up a token, taking the actions. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of the challenges, because these challenges are how you're going to earn points from the fish that you're catching. So I'm going to start over here. Here's the small species challenge. And what the small species challenge is if you ever catch a flounder, a roach, and a perch, whenever you catch the third of all those species, you have all 3 species collected, then you get to take the top trophy from this one. The top one is always going to be the most points, and so down the line. So you always want to try to be the first person to catch all 3 of those species. If you do that, you get 5 points. The next challenge I'm going to talk to you about is the mystery weight. And the mystery weight here, you're going to flip the top one over to show what weight you're trying to get. So in this case, it's 6 pounders. So if you catch a 6-pound fish, you get to take that trophy, and that'll be worth 1 point for you. And then the next one is flipped after that is taken by whichever player takes it. Another challenge there is the fastest to 8 species challenge. That's over here. And 8 species is 8 unique species. So if I had 2 wrasse, that would just count as 1 species. But if I had a wrasse and a mackerel, that would count as 2 species. And I'm really trying to get 8 unique species like that, and the first person to do it gets the top trophy, again, which is worth 5 points, or the most points. So you always want to try to be the first person to collect 8 unique species. Another challenge over here is the fastest to 12 fish challenge, and that's not unique species, that's just total fish. So if I caught 6 wrasse and 6 mackerel, that's only 2 different species, but that's 12 total fish, so I get to take the first to 12 fish challenge, and that's a 2-pointer. It's always 2 points in every game you play, and actually that triggers the end of the game. So whenever 12 fish are caught by any player, they take that trophy, the game trigger is then end, and each player gets their final turn before the game is over and we do the end game scoring. There's also the Master Angler challenges. There's 2 different types. There's one type that is if you ever have 3 of the same type of Master Angler fish, so if for example, I'd caught 3 ray fish, then I get to take the top trophy there, and all the trophies in this Master Angler challenge are worth 2 points, so I get to take a 2-point bonus for that. There's also 4 different species, so if you catch a ray, a dogfish, a crab, and then an eel, for example, you would then get to take one of the Master Angler trophies, and those are worth 2 points as well, which is a good bonus to have. Then there are the shore, the lake, and the river challenges, and I'll show you how those score at the end of the game, and I'll show you how those work in just a second. So here I'm going to demonstrate the end of game challenge scoring for the lake. You can see here lake fish for 3 different players. Here's player 1, here's player 2, and here's player 3. And there's an end of game challenge for each of the different locations. So one for the lake, one for the shore, and one for the river. So I'm just going to show you how to do the lake. So first what you do is you look at the different species you have. You can only submit 1 fish per species for the end of game challenge. So this player has a sea trout, a pike, and a perch, so they can submit all 3 of those fish because they're each unique species. So what you do is you flip them over, and again, this is not the final artwork that you're looking at. It's the backs of these cards are going to look different. But just for example, you can see the weight of each of these fish. So it's a 7-pounder, a 2-pounder, and a 3-pounder for a total of 12 pounds. So that's the total amount of pounds for player 1. And player 2, they can only submit one of the 2 sea trout. So we'll flip them over and see which one is heavier. So the sea trout here is 6 and this one is 5. So we're going to submit the 6-pounder because it's heavier, so this one is discarded out of the game. So for a total of 26 pounds for player 2. And then finally player 3, they have 3 pikes. So only one of those 3 pike can be submitted. So even though this player has the heaviest pike at 17 pounds, they can only submit 2 of these for the end of game challenge. So these 2 are not going to get submitted. Sorry, they can only submit 1 of these for the end of game challenge. So these 2 are not going to get submitted. They're out of the game, and this player only has the 1 pike to submit for 17 pounds. So this player in the middle actually is the winner of the top trophy, so the most points, and the top trophy is worth 5 points, so there's a trophy that represent that. And the second player is this player over here, 1 pike for 17 pounds is the second most amount of weight, and then this player gets the last trophy. In a 3-player game, this is how the trophies would look. It would be 5, 3, and then 2 points. There's also points for the tags, so if you submit a fish that has a tag that matches the color of the tag that we set out on the game board at the beginning of the game. Here, this green tag is the tag we were using. And that's 1 bonus point for every tag that matches the one on the game board. Now there's one other thing, if there's ever a tie for the total pounds, each fish also has a timestamp, and that timestamp is just an indicator of when the fish was caught during the tournament. And whoever has the earliest timestamp in any given tie wins the tie. Same thing at the end of the game, if there's ever a tie for the final score, whoever has caught the single fish that was caught earliest, with the earliest timestamp, that player breaks that tie. At the end of the game, you're going to add up all your points, and your points are just the sum of all of the trophies that you've collected. So for example, the number that's on the back, that's the number of points that you earn. You also get 1 point for every completed Master Angler card, cards that you've successfully filled with bait and then moved to the other side of your player board. 1 point for each of those. You don't get any points for Master Angler fish that you did not finish filling up with bait. Here this ray only has 2 and it needs 3, so that's 0 points. You don't get any point for any bait left over in your tackle box, that's not worth anything. You don't get any points for the tackle you didn't use in the game, so try to use that. But you do get points for any submitted fish that have a tag that matches the color of the tag for the tag challenge at the beginning of the game. So here I get 2 bonus points for the green tags, like I showed you in the scoring earlier. The player who wins the game is the player with the most points. They're crowned the tournament champion, and everyone congratulates them on their success.